anniversary had always been an important occasion in our marriage. It was a time to celebrate the love we had built together, to reflect on the moments that had made us who we were as a couple. I had spent weeks planning the perfect evening for us. It was going to be special, not just for me, but for her too. I wanted to show her how much she meant to me, how much I appreciated everything she had brought into my life. Our first few years of marriage were filled with laughter, and we had shared so many dreams. So, when our fifth anniversary approached, I wanted to recreate some of the magic from our early days. I decided to invite my parents along, something they were initially hesitant about. But this was more than just a date night. It was a celebration of love, family, and commitment. I thought it would mean something for her, too. I reserved a table at one of her favorite restaurants, a place that held sentimental value for us. Our first date had been there, and I had hoped to evoke that same sense of romance. I carefully arranged the evening to be perfect. I ordered the finest wine, chose a secluded table, and even picked out a gift I knew she would love. The goal was simple: to rekindle the magic of our relationship, to remind us of why we had fallen in love in the first place. As the day approached, I felt a growing sense of excitement. Our relationship hadn't been without its struggles, but we had weathered them together. I wanted this anniversary to be a fresh start, a way to celebrate the bond we had built. My parents were looking forward to the evening as well. It felt like a perfect plan, one that would remind all of us of the importance of family and love. Little did I know, this would be the night that everything would unravel. My excitement masked a growing unease that had been creeping up on me in recent weeks. There had been small changes in my wife's behavior. She had been distant, distracted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I had tried to ignore the thoughts, brushing them off as paranoia. After all, we had been together for years, and I trusted her. But something about the anniversary celebration felt different, as if the universe was preparing me for something I wasn't ready to face. For the past few weeks leading up to our anniversary, I had been noticing small changes in my wife's behavior that I couldn't ignore. At first, I brushed them off, thinking they were just the result of her busy work schedule or stress. But as time went on, the feeling grew more persistent, nagging at the back of my mind. She had always been a loving and attentive partner, but now she seemed distant. Conversations with her became less engaging, as if her mind was elsewhere. She was often preoccupied, scrolling through her phone or staring off into space when I spoke to her. It wasn't that she was being rude, it was just that there was a palpable absence in her presence, a disconnection that I hadn't felt before. I tried to talk to her about it, but she always assured me that everything was fine. She blamed her work stress or the busyness of our lives, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had been traveling more frequently for work, often returning late and too exhausted to engage with me. I understood that her job was demanding, but the distance between us felt more emotional than physical. When I asked her how things were going, she would always say she was fine, but the more I asked, the more I realized how closed off she had become. She didn't seem to be interested in our shared activities anymore, and the laughter we once enjoyed together was increasingly rare. I tried to hold on to the idea that it was just a rough patch, something we could work through, but deep down, I couldn't shake the sense that something else was going on. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that I was being paranoid. After all, she was still coming home to me every night, still showing up for family events, still going through the motions of a wife. But my gut told me otherwise. Something wasn't adding up. The feeling became stronger as our anniversary approached. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it felt as if she was pulling away from me more and more. I started to question whether I was imagining things or if there was something deeper going on. Her phone, which she used to keep open and unlocked, had become a source of mystery. She would glance at it nervously, quickly locking it when I walked into the room. At night, she was quick to turn off notifications, something she had never done before. Despite all of this, I wanted to ignore the warning signs. I told myself that we had been through so much together that I couldn't believe she would betray me. But even as I prepared for the anniversary celebration, The unease settled in my chest. I couldn't shake the nagging thought that I was about to learn something I wasn't ready to face. The night of our anniversary finally arrived, and I was determined to make it special. I could feel my heart pounding with excitement as we arrived at the restaurant. My parents were already there, waiting at the table. The atmosphere was perfect: dim lighting, soft music, and the smell of fresh flowers in the air. It was everything I had hoped for, everything I had envisioned. I looked at my wife, who smiled at me, but there was something off in her eyes. Her smile seemed forced, and the sparkle that used to be in her eyes was missing. Still, I pushed my doubts aside. We exchanged small talk, shared a few laughs, and I reminded myself that this was a celebration of us, of the life we had built together. My parents were happily engaged in conversation, unaware of the growing tension between my wife and me. I tried to ignore the subtle distance I was feeling, telling myself that this was the perfect night, and nothing should ruin it. As the evening went on, I found myself more and more focused on my wife's behavior. She seemed preoccupied, constantly checking her phone under the table, glancing around the room as if looking for something or someone. The thought didn't sit right with me, but I tried to push it out of my mind. At some point, I excused myself to use the restroom. It was a brief moment away from the table, but it was enough to set the stage for the moment that would change everything. When I returned to the table, I was hit with the most shocking sight of my life. My wife was sitting closely with a man I didn't recognize, her body language open and intimate. They were laughing, leaning into each other, and for a moment, I thought I was imagining things. But then, she reached for his hand, and I felt the ground beneath me crumble. The man's presence, their shared smiles, and the way she leaned into him, it was all too much. I froze in place as I watched my wife and this man, who I later found out was a colleague of hers, share an intimate moment. I had seen them together before, but never like this. There was something electric between them, a chemistry that was undeniable. My wife, the woman I had trusted with my heart, had not only betrayed me emotionally, but had done it right in front of me and my parents. I couldn't breathe. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I slowly approached the table, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It felt like time had stopped, like the entire room was spinning around me, and I was trapped in this horrible moment. My parents looked confused, unaware of the significance of what was happening. They were engaged in their own conversation, oblivious to the fact that their son's world was crashing down around him. I wanted to shout, to scream, to ask her why, but I couldn't. The anger, pain, and confusion left me speechless. The man, this stranger to me, had his hand on her shoulder, and I could see the way she was looking at him. Her eyes, once filled with love for me, were now soft, almost affectionate, as she gazed at him. She smiled in a way that I had never seen before, and that was the final blow. I felt my heart shatter as the reality set in. The woman I had loved for so many years, the woman I had trusted implicitly, was in love with someone else. The betrayal felt like a knife to my chest. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I walked up to the table, my voice trembling with rage and hurt. "What is this?" I asked, my words barely escaping my lips. The entire table fell silent as my wife looked up, startled, and then immediately attempted to distance herself from the man. Her face flushed with panic, and the man awkwardly stood up, trying to leave. But it was too late. I was already in the midst of a storm I couldn't control. My parents looked from one to the other, trying to piece together what had just happened. I turned to my wife, my heart aching with betrayal. "How could you do this to me, in front of my family, on our anniversary?" My voice cracked with the weight of the pain, and I felt as though I was suffocating. She tried to explain, but her words felt empty. "It wasn't like that," she said. I never meant for it to happen this way." She stammered, attempting to justify her actions, but nothing could make it better. There was no excuse for what she had done, and she knew it. I turned to my parents, the look on their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and heartbreak. They couldn't believe what was happening. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice strained, "this is what your son has been living with." The truth had been exposed in the most painful way possible. There was no way to take it back. The trust was broken, and no amount of explanations could fix the damage. The days following that horrific evening were filled with emotional turmoil. My wife tried to apologize, begged for my forgiveness, and even promised to end things with the man. But her words meant nothing anymore. The betrayal had already taken root in my soul, and no amount of apologies could erase the pain. She blamed her actions on stress and feeling neglected, but those excuses only made the wound deeper. I had given her everything, my trust, my heart, and she had destroyed it in the blink of an eye. I felt like a stranger in my own home. Every conversation, every interaction felt like a lie. I couldn't look at her without remembering the scene at the restaurant. Her smile for another man. Her affection for someone who wasn't me. I was heartbroken, devastated, and confused. I wanted to believe her when she said she was sorry, but the truth was that I couldn't trust her anymore. The damage was done, and I realized that I couldn't stay in a marriage built on shattered trust. The days that followed the betrayal were filled with a mixture of emotional devastation and intense reflection. After the shocking incident at the restaurant, I spent hours pacing through our house, alone with my thoughts, trying to make sense of everything. The woman I had loved for years, the woman I had built my future with, had shattered everything in a single, irreversible moment. I could still hear her voice begging for forgiveness, but the words fell flat. Every apology she made felt empty, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear. I had tried, for weeks, to hold on to the hope that things could be salvaged, but deep down, I knew the truth. The trust had been irrevocably broken. It wasn't just about the affair itself. It was about the deep betrayal, the fact that she had crossed a line with someone else, and how little she seemed to care about the pain it caused me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I could never look at her the same way again. How could I? How could I ever trust her with my heart when she had already given it away to someone else? I spent sleepless nights wrestling with the idea of divorce. The vows we had taken years ago echoed in my mind, but they felt meaningless now. I loved her once, but love alone wasn't enough to hold a relationship together. Trust was the foundation of everything, and that foundation had crumbled. Divorce was never something I imagined for us, but the thought of continuing to live in this painful, toxic dynamic was unbearable. I finally made the decision. I filed for divorce. It felt like a relief in some ways, but also like a loss. The idea of severing ties with the woman who had been my partner for so long left a hollow feeling in my chest. The thought of starting over, of rebuilding my life from the ruins of this marriage, felt both daunting and necessary. It was a decision made not out of anger, but out of survival. I had to walk away for my own emotional well-being. When I told her, she was devastated. She cried, begged me to reconsider, and promised to change. But the truth was that I could no longer believe her promises. The damage was done, and I couldn't keep pretending that things could go back to the way they were. The trust had been broken beyond repair, and as much as it hurt, I knew it was the only way forward. Divorce was my only option for finding peace again. After the divorce was filed, an overwhelming sense of injustice consumed me. I couldn't simply walk away and let her continue with her life, as if nothing had happened. She needed to understand the depth of the hurt she had caused me, not just emotionally, but in every facet of my life. She had publicly humiliated me, betrayed my trust, and destroyed the life we had built together. No amount of apology could undo that. I knew revenge would never fully heal the wound, but I wanted to make sure that she felt the weight of her actions. I wasn't driven by hatred. I didn't want to destroy her, but I did want her to experience the consequences of the choices she had made. If she thought she could get away with betraying me and simply moving on with her life, she was wrong. I was determined to make sure the truth of her infidelity would follow her, that people would know what she had done. I started by gathering evidence. It wasn't just about revenge for the sake of it. It was about truth. I wanted to expose what had happened to the people in her life, especially those who were closest to her. The affair wasn't just a betrayal of me, it was a betrayal of the people who trusted her, of her friends, family, and colleagues. They had the right to know. I wanted them to see her for what she had become. I used everything at my disposal to ensure that the information spread. I contacted people she worked with, friends who were close to her, and even family members who were unaware of what had transpired. Slowly, the truth began to leak out. I didn't want to make her life a living nightmare, but I needed her to understand that actions have consequences. She couldn't get away with the destruction she had caused without facing the aftermath. I watched as her reputation began to falter. The man she had cheated with wasn't exactly a stand-up individual, and soon, whispers of their relationship began to circulate. People started questioning her judgment, and the fallout was inevitable. I knew that some would empathize with her, but others would see the betrayal for what it was, and I took solace in knowing that she couldn't hide from the truth any longer. Though the revenge didn't bring me peace, it allowed me to regain a sense of control over my life. For too long, I had been the one deceived, the one left in the dark. Now, I was the one who held the power to expose the truth. It wasn't about hurting her, it was about holding her accountable for what she had done. The ripple effects of her infidelity were far-reaching. The damage wasn't confined to our marriage, it spread to her friendships, her professional life, and her sense of self. The people who had once supported her, who had believed in her, now looked at her with distrust. The shame she felt was palpable, but it wasn't the kind of shame that came with genuine remorse. It was the kind of shame that came from being exposed for her actions. Her colleagues at work were the first to learn about the affair, and soon it became the topic of conversation. The whispers, the judging looks, the coldness, everyone seemed to turn their back on her. Some of them tried to comfort her, to remind her that everyone makes mistakes, but I could see through it. She was losing their respect, and she knew it. They no longer saw her as the dependable, trustworthy person she once was. Her family wasn't immune to the consequences either. My parents, who had once adored her, were now heartbroken and angry. They couldn't fathom how someone they had welcomed into their lives could do such a thing to their son. The conversations with them were strained, filled with disappointment and pain. My mother, especially, was devastated by the betrayal. She couldn't understand how I could have been so blind to the signs. It was a bitter pill for her to swallow, and she struggled to accept the reality of the situation. The final blow came when her close friends, who had been her confidants through everything, started distancing themselves from her. They couldn't support her actions, and they made it clear that they were disappointed in her. Some chose to continue their friendships with her, but the dynamic had changed. The trust was gone, and with it, the respect she had once commanded. In the end, I knew that exposing her affair hadn't just been an act of revenge, it was a consequence of her choices. She had hurt me deeply, and I couldn't let her get away with pretending nothing had happened. Watching her lose her reputation and the relationships she had once valued gave me a strange sense of closure. The consequences of her betrayal were playing out in front of me, and though it didn't take away the pain, it made me feel like justice was being served. The aftermath of the divorce and the revenge was a time of reckoning. I spent months processing everything, grieving for the marriage I had lost, but also for the person I had been before the betrayal. I realized that I had to let go of the anger and the hurt in order to move forward with my life. It was difficult, especially in the early stages, but slowly I began to heal. I focused on myself, on rediscovering the things that had brought me happiness before all of this. I started taking up hobbies I had neglected, like hiking and painting. I surrounded myself with people who supported me, friends and family who lifted me up and reminded me that I was worthy of love and respect. I learned to trust again, but this time I trusted myself first. There were days when I missed her, when the weight of the loss felt unbearable, but those moments became fewer and fewer. I realized that, in time, I could rebuild my life without her. I didn't need her approval, her love, or her presence to be whole. I had learned to stand on my own, to reclaim my power, and to move beyond the shadows of our broken relationship. Eventually, I found peace. The pain of the betrayal never fully disappeared, but it became manageable. I no longer let it define me. I found new goals, new passions, and even began dating again. Though the scars remained, they were reminders of how far I had come. I had survived the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the divorce. And in the end, I realized that I was stronger than I had ever known. I had emerged from the ashes of my marriage, ready to embrace a new chapter in my life, one that was mine to write. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so and press the notification bell. This way, you'll stay updated with more shocking real-life stories.